Gen Z, they were born between 96 and 2010. Was born in 1998, so I'm in the earlier half of the generation, but still a part of it. And we're actually now the majority generation on this planet. So we make up 32% of the world's population right now. So we're the majority, which means obviously that naturally we're going to be entering the workforce very quickly, and not just that, we're going to be controlling a lot of things once we start entering executive positions, etc.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
Hello and welcome back to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast. My name is Victor Gaxiola, and joining me today again is my co-host,
Kim Gaxiola.
We're very excited to continue this fourth season of our podcast around the theme of innovation. And so today we're very excited to have a very special guest who's joining us from Minnesota, Angelica Sirotin of the Digital Pioneers Network, and also writer and blog for the Angelica Factor magazine that you can find online.
So it's hard to believe that Angelica is going to talk to us about Gen Z in the workforce. I can't believe they're already there.
Oh, yeah. And they're not only are they there, Kim, but as you'll hear in this podcast, and we've already recorded it, so as you'll hear, our audience, the amazing contributions that Gen Z is making to the changes in the workplace and how so much of this has been accelerated as a result of the pandemic.
Right. So Gen Z is now entering into the workforce, and some of them have been there actually for a while now, and long enough that they're starting to make a major impact.
Absolutely. And so here is our interview and conversation with Angelica Sirotin. We hope you enjoy it. Hello, Angelica. Thanks for joining us on the program. We're so thrilled to have you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Well, I've obviously taken a look at your website, certainly was drawn to the Angelica Factor and your blog posts, and of course the things that you're doing at the Digital Pioneers Network, and we want to explore all of that. But I think the thing that kept coming up to me, Angelica, is that I see you almost as this voice of your generation, and we're talking about Generation Z. So why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your background, and what brought you to the work you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you so much for having me. Usually when people ask me this question, so tell me about yourself, people dive into their background immediately, but I'd say one of three things. I'm a naturally curious person. I have a huge appetite for knowledge, for learning, and this motivation that I have to really do things, it comes from this drive to make an impact. So I think these three things are kind of this very powerful combination that define myself. And I think that, further along, when you're curious, curiosity is really what causes you to seek more knowledge and to grow. And the more you know, honestly, the more you feel empowered to make the changes you desire, to make that impact that you desire. So that's just that in a nutshell, kind of about me. Now, getting back into my background just briefly, which is what you mentioned. I'm currently a venture entrepreneur, so my background is actually in emerging technologies like ed tech, market, and esports. A couple of years ago, I actually started a local pitch consultancy here in Minneapolis where I lived. I learned everything there is to know about investor decks. I DM'd a bunch of investors on LinkedIn. Some didn't reply, some didn't. And I asked them, listen, just give me 5 minutes of your time. I want to know what makes a perfect pitch. And I even created some fake pitch decks of companies that didn't exist just so that I knew I had a real handle on my stuff. And from there, I began to grow my network locally in Minneapolis and then eventually nationally and internationally. But I also would like to say that I truly began my entrepreneurial journey probably as a toddler, in kindergarten all through elementary school, because I was always organizing these companies. And I know you can't see what I just did. I did it with air quotes companies because they obviously weren't real. But for my classmates, they worked at my companies, which I basically opened 20 minutes before class time. My teacher would open the door and students were allowed to come in and they could draw or whatever, but I was creating these organizations, and we had someone delegated to bring snacks, and then we'd use chairs and pretend that they were printers, and my peers, they seemed to really want me to lead. They really enjoyed being under my direction. And it really, I cannot explain how much happiness it gave me to see that I was giving them this purpose and this greater meaning. And this whole idea carried me to this day. And right now, I'm the co founder of Digital Pioneers Network, which is an AI think tank. I'm executive director and producer of Digital Pioneers Dialogue as well. And I'm also known in public as a Gen Z digitalization expert and thought leader, which brings me to your podcast today.
Wow. Well, the first thing I was thinking as you were talking about all this is that if I was in school with you, I would definitely want to be part of your group. In any sort of group
Yes.
project. I want Angelica to lead our group. That is awesome.
You'd get brownie points from me, that's for sure.
That's funny. It's your calling. You think when you look back at what you were doing when you were young and now where you are, and you go, oh, that all makes sense. I have a lot of stories like that myself where it's like, I was drawn to economics even when I was a kid, when I figured out instead of paying 25 cents for a candy bar, now I had to pay 35 cents. And I said, that's not right. And I remember my grandpa saying, that's inflation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these experiences shape you into ultimately what you are. It's always the environment that shapes your ecosystem.
Right.
Well, one area that you explored there was this concept of the entrepreneur versus the intrapreneur. And I know you've written about this in the past. And so I was curious, what is it about the Gen Z that is really drawn to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so according to actually Nielsen, I remember 54% of Gen Z, they indicate that they want to start their own company. We're an incredibly entrepreneurial generation, and I think it has to do with the fact that we were born into an era of complete digitalization. I was born and raised alongside the internet, alongside social media, and then we quickly found that, hey, if I post something on Instagram or on Facebook, immediately thousands of people can see it. And oh, it's not that hard. I can go on Wix.com or Weebly, create a website, and start drop shipping. I can start selling things. So I think that this access that technology gave us enabled us to see that literally the world is at your fingertips. You can learn any skill you want on YouTube. 84% of Gen Z use YouTube as an education source. So, because of the access that is surrounded by us, we literally have worlds in our pocket. Every single one of us, Gen Z, not just Gen Z, but everyone, we all have smartphones. You can learn any skill you want. And so, I think that this incredible amount of access that we were born into allowed us to instantly see all of the different industries, all of the different possibilities that we can extend ourselves into. And I think that's what really shapes the entrepreneurial brain is freedom to think, creativity, and access. I think those three things are what build an entrepreneur.
Wow, that's so much there. And I think of my son who, I cannot say anything to him without being certain the facts are there to back it up, because I know he's going to search on YouTube or search somewhere on the internet to make sure my facts are accurate. And we're listening to the debates the other day, and I mean, they have this BS radar.
Yeah, it's pretty perked up. Well, the other thing too, my first understanding, it was almost like this parallel universe. So we're Gen X, and then our kids are Gen Z. They're falling into that next gen, and was the fact that there was like all these YouTube stars and entertainment resources that I was completely unfamiliar with, and it was like, who is this person? And they looked at me almost like, this is like the biggest star in YouTube right now, and I didn't even see it as another channel. And that's when I first started getting the feeling like, uh-oh, I'm getting old. I'm getting really old.
And the fact that anybody could start something up and, become viral. We used to live in a traditional way where you get famous because you get picked up by a great show and it's, shown on a network, and that's how you become a star, or you get cast for a movie. And nowadays that's not the case. Anybody can have their minutes, 5 minutes of
Yeah.
fame, or
Anybody can literally go viral. TikTok is one of the best places to go viral. I remember I posted a video just for fun a month ago and it got, thousands of views. So it's just this incredible access. And, you were just talking about tradition. Now with all of this whole startup ecosystem and all these new access to different tools to learn new information, Hierarchy is not really a thing that connects with Gen Z. We're very anti hierarchy. We don't like the whole corporate structure. We see that, any person who has a motivation, who is willing to learn something, they should be able to succeed. And I think that's what also contributes to the whole entrepreneurial mindset of Gen Z as well.
Hmm. I think the other part of it too is I was just thinking about the exemplars, the people that you look to, from a generational standpoint, usually tend to be a generation ahead of you. So in our case, it might have been like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates as far as the innovation is concerned, as far as the development. And then you have more like Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk. You have these people who are really pushing, the envelope and stretching not only your generation, but the entire global ecosystem when you think about connectivity and communications. Yeah. So very fascinating. One other area that I wanted to explore, which I found interesting, is the idea of robots in the workplace, and the growth and confidence that Gen Z seems to have in AI. And this is a generational difference because Gen Z seems to be very confident with having and accepting the fact that robots or artificial intelligence is going to be part of the workplace going forward, and that there's no real fear. If nothing else, they embrace this new technology, whereas I'd say more traditional workers are fearful of AI. They have more of a negative connotation about being displaced as a result.
Yeah, I think, I just want to briefly mention an excerpt actually from that article I wrote on the robots. So, in this article I write, most Gen Z employees, they have confidence in AI and automation. Nintex found in a September 2019 report about a survey of 500 current and 500 future Gen Z employees. And some 88% of the Gen Z survey takers said that AI and automation can make their jobs easier. So, of course, artificial intelligence can make your job easier. It automates all processes, it eliminates the need for a human to do a monotonous, mundane task over and over again. Gen Z is all about efficiency and optimization. And I think because we were just immediately born and exposed to internet and we want things now, we have this access. And oh, look at that. Now kids right now are on their smartphones and they're talking with AI chatbots. Of course, we are more comfortable with artificial intelligence. Older generations, some of them don't even know what artificial intelligence is. I tried explaining the concept to my grandparents and they still couldn't completely understand it. So obviously there's a huge bridge, there's this huge gap between older generations' perception of artificial intelligence and younger generation perception of artificial intelligence. But if you go back when computers were first being invented, people were like, "Oh, no one's going to use them in the workplace. They're just going to be sitting in giant processing rooms. Universities are going to be using them. We don't need this. We can do things by hand." Well, look where we are now. So it's just a matter of it's a natural evolutionary efficiency that just getting adopted. And because Gen Z was born into it, because Gen Z understands what artificial intelligence is, because we use it literally every single day. Content recommendation algorithm systems are built into every single app. We know what AI does. We understand it from a different perspective than other generations do because it grew up with us, literally. So because we evolved with it, it's only natural for us to have it in the workplace. And anywhere where we can use it, we will use it.
Hmm. It's so funny. I just completed the fourth season of *Halt and Catch Fire*, which was on AMC. I just watched it on Netflix. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's four seasons of a show that covers this group of individual like engineers and hackers that are, it takes place like in the late 80s or early 80s into the 90s, and it's during this kind of the birth of the internet, the birth of the home personal computer, the laptop. And it's just so exciting how much they got right and how much they got wrong, but you cannot discount the level of enthusiasm and excitement in them knowing that this was a game changer, that all of these technologies were game changers for the future of work, the future of home, the future of communities and communication. It's such a great series. I highly recommend it.
Yeah,
So
I haven't looked into it, but I would absolutely love to. And, just quickly also, a lot of the focus on Gen Z and the future of work, it's on what current employers are doing right now to retain Gen Z and to recruit Gen Z, but very little is there information on what the world of work is going to look like under Gen Z employers, under Gen Z CEOs, and that's an area that I'm more specializing in that very few are. So there's definitely a difference between, talking about Gen Xers trying to hire Gen Z versus Gen Z hiring Gen Xers and vice versa.
So that's interesting. You have you're always preaching to the choir when you're talking to Gen Z, but the challenge is when you're speaking to the older generations, how to get them on board. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, just first and foremost, for people tuning in, I haven't even mentioned this yet, but Gen Z, they were born between 96 and 2010. Was born in 1998, so I'm in the earlier half of the generation, but still a part of it. And we're actually now the majority generation on this planet. So, we make up 32% of the world's population right now. So, we're the majority. Which means obviously that naturally we're going to be entering the workforce very quickly, and not just that, we're going to be controlling a lot of things once we start entering executive positions, etc. So the really interesting questions about future of work is, what is the workplace going to look like under Gen Z employers? And also innovation. So that's just on hiring practices. If you want also, I have some insights on like what the work environment will look like as well.
So one thing that I want to ask the question, because I know this kind of digs deeper into the whole thing, is absolutely the transparency is so important, and ethics is so important with your generation. Again, I go back to the debate the other day, and thinking us as Gen X parents were used to this, but I was embarrassed for my kids to see it. And I think, how do you deal with transparency with AI in terms of you can't really see what the algorithms are behind it, and we also see this problem with content being recommended to us because it's feeding to our echo chamber. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are about that, and what a Gen Z thinker has to say about that, because are they, even though you trust the AI, do you really trust it? Because what's the algorithm really feeding you?
Yeah, so because of this, there's this whole new field. Well, it's been around for some time, but it's called Explainable Artificial Intelligence, or XAI for short. And basically, the one of the biggest problems with artificial intelligence algorithms is that if the AI is working on something and spits out an output, and the actual developer, software developer who was creating this program has no idea how it got to that point, then that is a completely non-transparent AI system, right? So the whole field of explainable artificial intelligence is that the AI should be able to explain to you why the output is the output it is, and then you can trace back mistakes and errors and understand where things went wrong. So there's this research that's being heavily invested in on XAI. There's also responsible artificial intelligence and ethical artificial intelligence, such as when should data be analyzed? When in some cases can it actually cause discrimination? So, for example, I believe maybe it was Amazon or another company, but because males and females had different words that they were using in their resumes, it was biased towards males because they were using words like executed this properly. You know how people flirt and basically, inflate in their resumes that they're so excellent in certain qualities, and it aligned certain words with characteristics of men, and it was more biased towards men. So, a way that we can eliminate this bias and make sure artificial intelligence is for the people is obviously to have more robust data sources, is to involve more diversity and women in the workplace, because then you have a more robust data set of all kinds of people, not just white men. You have women, you have diversity, you have ethnic minorities, so then you have a really robust data set and data pool. And also to pool from various people from different areas of expertise when creating these artificial intelligence algorithms. Because if you're only looking from a certain section, a certain niche of people, the AI will be coded in a way that reflects their mindset and not necessarily all. So when going to the workplace, because Gen Z so values diversity, ethics, and transparency, all of these principles are going to be encoded in the next generation of artificial intelligence, hence accelerating explainable artificial intelligence implementations and responsible and ethical AI.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's interesting, and it's encouraging to hear that, just because I was listening in on a panel during the Fast Company Innovation Festival, and they were talking about diversity, and diversity not necessarily in saying that we need to be able to check these boxes, that we need to have an African American, we need to have a Hispanic, we need to, from a standpoint of, let's say, race, or a standpoint of education, or standpoint of age. And what they said is, you wouldn't want to, and they were trying to make it to explain it to a regular person, and say you would never want to field a football team with just quarterbacks. You do need defense, you need offense, you need linebackers, you need big linemen, you need people who can run the ball, you need people who can throw the ball. And so the same applies, let's say, in any workplace or any organization, that you need the diversification of thought and experience, of age. And then included in that, it is helpful to have people of different backgrounds or different nationalities, because it gives you the best representation overall when it comes to being able to bring to the table different ways of thinking. So diversification of thought. And so I think, going back to Kim's question, I think part of the challenge is, when I look at, let's say, my Facebook news feed, or if I log onto my computer and I'm subscribed to certain news services, that the AI may be really smart in saying, well, because you're opening these stories or you're reading from these people, this is probably the information that you're going to like, that I get tracked in that the echo chamber of only receiving the kind of information that I seem to like, as opposed to getting that diversity of thought, where I probably should read something that is different from what I like, in order for me to continue to expand and to learn. And so one of the concerns, I think, from education is needing diversification of thought and different ideas, even those that you may not agree with, because that's the only way we really learn. If we're only hearing the things that we like and know, we're not really learning.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, without feedback, it's impossible to grow. So exactly echoes that statement.
Angelica, we're both really loving this conversation, but I want to take it back to you providing some insights on the work environment and how Gen Z approaches the world of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember earlier I mentioned hiring characteristics of Gen Z employers, and something also to add, obviously, is the work environment. So there's four key things that I want to bring up here. So first of all, Gen Z employers are going to be very keen on providing continuous learning opportunities for their employees. So there will be constant reskilling and upskilling campaigns to make sure that not just Gen Z employees know everything's up to date, but also for Gen X and for other generations that are involved in the workplace, to make sure that everyone is properly skilled to do their jobs. So I remember earlier we were talking about how we can bridge the gap between Gen Z and older generations, because Gen Z employers want to provide this even ability for everybody to excel at their jobs. There's going to be continuous learning opportunities provided. The second thing is a bottom-up approach to leadership instead of a top-down approach to leadership. This is how Gen Z usually manages things. We want to hear opinions from everybody. Like we said earlier, you need diversity in opinion and of thought. An employee who is not necessarily in the C-suite, who's not necessarily an executive, doesn't mean that they can't provide something very valuable. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for all employees to voice their thoughts more and to be more involved in processes. And now moving on to the actual executive positions, a lot of them are going to be augmented with digital facets. So for example, We're going to see a chief empathy officer. We're going to see chief digital officers are very common nowadays. Chief ethics officers, chief transparency officers, humanistic officers to make sure that people are valued in the workplace and to make sure that there's robust data sets that reflect diversity. And even on top of chief financial officers, there will be augmented with chief financial officers whose job is to look at the return on investment of artificial intelligence applications. So we'll see that there will be a lot more augmentation of digitalization to the C-suite. And then lastly, as mentioned earlier, of course, will be a big emphasis on ethics and accountability for his culture. There will be ethical codes of conduct that all employees will be required to know and to abide by, because that's the only way that Gen Z employers are going to allow a workplace to function. So those are the four key things that I'd like to talk that are basically going to define the Gen Z work environment under Gen Z CEOs.
Wow.
And how do you get there? Because, I'm thinking just from my position, thinking, well, we're years away from that, and a lot has to happen in between because, you're just getting out of college, and you have to learn a lot still. Digital platforms are great. You understand how to do all of that. But then there are a lot of soft skills that just take time learning in the workplace. So how do you go, what does that look like in the near term versus maybe the 10, 20-year track record of getting to that C-suite?
Yeah, so Gen Z right now, the older end of Gen Z, they're around 25, 26. So they're already well in the workplace. Some of them might already be in executive positions. We right now are in a really good time to set up Gen Z for the work environment that I just mentioned, because right now the currently C-suite positions that I talked about, like chief digital officers, they already exist in many different organizations, not just top tech organizations. They are a combination of what used to be the head of IT and information systems combined together. Empathy officers are very common nowadays, especially marketing, because empathy and marketing go together. There aren't any, as far as I know, chief transparency officers, but there is a huge emphasis on the human in the workplace now and human centricity, especially with all of these applications of artificial intelligence. And a lot of employers right now, they really are looking towards the whole idea of reskilling and upskilling and making sure that everybody is equipped to handle these new technologies. So right now, the work environment is evolving. So by the time Gen Z becomes CEOs and gets into these executive roles, we can definitely see a work environment that is fully functioning like this. So we're on our way to getting there. It's just that because of Gen Z preferences, as I mentioned earlier, their core values, it's going to be accelerated by them and it's going to be here to stay. And that's what the future of work will look like from then on. And it will be augmented by future generations. Who knows what kind of technologies we're going to have 40 years down the line. But whatever that is, it's going to evolve that way.
I would agree completely on the approach to thinking of this as almost like an upside down pyramid. And I can't, and because of the accelerated growth of technology and especially the adoption that has become native, to the people in your generation, it really is the older generations that need to relearn and understand the world that we're moving towards, as opposed to the world that they've known all along. And I know this. My first experience with this, and I've shared this story in the past, was when I worked for a startup in San Francisco a couple years ago, and we had a staff meeting, and this was a marketing team, and everybody sat down at the meeting. And they had their laptops open, and they were using Google Docs, and the agenda was on the Google Doc. And as the meeting was taking place, the 4 to 8 people that were in the meeting were all simultaneously writing their notes on the Google Doc in real time as the as the meeting was taking place. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, this is an adjustment. I'm not used to this," because I was still pen and paper. And I remember thinking, "Okay, I can't expect this group of people to adapt to my experience and to what I expect a meeting should look like or what notes should be look like. I need to be the one to adapt to this new world." And I like it. Like, I liked where it was going, but the amount of collaboration that was taking place. And so I think there's a lot of relearning that needs to take place, especially for those that are in positions of power, and to really embrace this new technology by bringing Gen Z thought leaders like yourself up to the executive ranks, or if nothing else, to be in a consultative role to assist them in seeing the light of where we're headed. And so this kind of brings me around to wanting to explore a little bit more about the Digital Pioneers Network. And if you can share, what is it that the Digital Pioneers Network is doing to assist organizations and individuals to move to this new world?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I dive into this quickly, I just want to say, bridging the divide, the way that you get older generations and even younger generations, because some Gen Z, they might not know also everything about technology. They might be resistant to learning new skills like data analysis. It can be, kind of difficult for people. Is to teach them the benefits. And the benefits of learning these new technologies and how they can really help your life and augment your life far outweigh the costs. And when you teach people the benefits, I think that is what will stop people from being so resistant to these new implementations. So that's just my thought there.
Mm-hmm.
That's like anything. Don't talk about the features, talk about the benefits. Mm-hmm.
So now diving into Digital Pioneers Network. So I'm co-founder of this network from a Gen Z angle. My co-founder is not Gen Z, but that's how we bridge the gap, as I've been speaking about. So our mission, basically, we were founded as this keystone organization that connects the ideas of enterprise leaders, large organizations, policymakers, AI thought leaders with actionable insights to fasten the pace of global digital transformation. So, our whole goal is to teach the benefits basically to the world of why digital transformation is important, why it's important to be versed in artificial intelligence and data analysis, how it's going to affect your life, why it's something that you shouldn't brush off. And so, for example, an extension of this would be the Digital Pioneers Dialogue, which I'm executive producer and director of, where we sit down with various executives. We've spoken to Bloomberg, we've spoken to Lloyd's Bank, we've spoken to NASDAQ, and we speak to people who are heads of artificial intelligence and who are chief digital officers themselves, and we really pick their brains about, listen, give us some actionable insights on how regular people are going to be affected by these artificial intelligence movements, by these new developments. How can governments best equip themselves to educate the populace? What kind of private initiatives do we have to start looking at to enable the acceleration of digital transformation? How can we make sure that it's not just the United States that's doing this, but all countries are working in tandem, because it's going to affect everybody? So we are working to bring together people who are like-minded, who are very experienced in what they do within digital domains, and to really disseminate information and research and knowledge on why it is important to understand that the next economy is here, the new digital front is here. And so we're really looking to understand this information from a first-hand perspective from digital pioneers, as it's called, because these are pioneers in their rights. These are innovators who understand these fields, and talk to them and create these strategic exchanges where we are able to not only give these people access to our network, but to also educate people. And part of my job as co-founder is to connect this high-level information with Gen Z on a very personal level and say, listen, I'm going through this. I want to lead you and show you how you can benefit yourself in this new digital world.
Wow. Well, I was doing some digging and reading up on the Digital Pioneers Network, and I couldn't help but think that the pandemic is very likely to have accelerated, your efforts, or at least the interest in the things that are being developed by the Digital Pioneers Network, or many of the themes that you discuss. So I was curious, have you seen any sort of impact that the pandemic forcing people to work from home or do school from home, has that had any impact on the approach that organizations are taking towards innovation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everything has changed since the coronavirus pandemic hit. I mean, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said that we completed 2 years of digital transformation in just 2 months in the beginning of the pandemic. Google has completely changed their work practices where they're saying you don't have to go into the office until 2021. And many organizations are doing this for good. And obviously, new implementations that are happening in the workplace are new interfaces, new softwares that employees can use that they used to not have. There used to be large conferences that people would attend. Now they're creating special tools for these online conferences and having these avatars where people are basically in some sort of simulation but are still engaging with other people. Artificial intelligence has greatly expanded because we realized that, oh, some of these office jobs, well, they weren't necessary in the first place. We can replace them with AI and automate them, and we can actually give these people abilities to learn new skills and new jobs that are more digitally aligned, like data analysis. So things have severely changed, and it's for the better. And this was going to happen no matter what. We were on a path to digitalization. Artificial intelligence was already here before coronavirus even happened. It's just the fact that because all of a sudden everything went remote, we had no choice. We had to go full force on and implement it now. So it has greatly, greatly accelerated all of this new innovation within the workplace, 100%.
Well, and I can't help but think that even if you look at the education system, K through 12 through college, it's unbelievable how quickly they had to pivot into doing everything in a digital format. And that's huge because they're the ones that are they're teaching the leaders of tomorrow. And if they didn't understand it, which I have to believe a lot of them did not understand what they could do, and now they're running with it. It's just unbelievable how things happened. Like we said, they pivoted over weeks, and that's something that would have taken them 10 years. The education world is very
With no
slow.
choice. You just have
Yeah.
to do it because there was no other choice in the sense. So it really, really went on fast.
I would say that like necessity is the mother of invention, and this whole podcast season has been around innovation. And it's interesting. We over the summer saw a school administrator from a local middle school, and we started having a conversation about how they were embracing this change. And what was really interesting was she said, when this first hit in the spring, we were all in reaction mode. We didn't know what to
Crisis
do. We were in a
mode.
crisis, and we immediately had to pivot to find a way that we could still deliver segments of education so that we could close out the rest of the year. And it was over the course of the summer that they regrouped and they said, look, it's very likely that the schools won't open in the fall. What can we do to get ahead of this, to find a new way of teaching an entire school district of students, a school through a remote learning environment where we can maintain a level of engagement, that the education can be delivered. And they found a way of doing it. And so when we talk about the accelerated pace, sometimes when your back is up against the wall, that's when you swing harder and faster,
Yeah.
to get yourself out of the situation.
Well, and I think that brings up another point that I have questions about is just the whole level of engagement. You mentioned engagement, and we see online, the pressure from teenagers and young adults. They've got to have the right thing to say, or you're not going to say it at all, because if you don't have the engagement, it's a social pressure, what have you. And going online, there was some of that for kids as well. The anxiety of, oh my gosh, I'm not going to talk on Zoom because if I don't say the right thing, everybody is looking at me. Somebody might take a picture of me, snap it, put it on social. I mean, those are the challenges also that are out there. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are obviously concerns and people not understanding what's the social norm, what are the social codes when you're on Zoom, because it's just a completely different environment, obviously, than being physically in person in a classroom. For younger students, of course, it can be, a little weird and embarrassing, but I think that for Gen Z mostly, because we were already plugged into, using FaceTime with multiple users, being on social media, we were kind of already used to this whole concept of being on video, this whole internet and digital. And some classes, even by the way, at universities were already administered online. So some had already been integrated online curriculums, and students had already been used to doing school online. So I think that, yeah, I mean, it's still something to get used to. I think younger generations are probably a little bit more equipped to handle this nuance than older generations are. But I think that there is no right answer to this. It's just something that we need to get used to. And I think that people are still getting used to it. And to be honest, 7 months since the COVID started, it's a very short time to completely change your habits. So I think it will still take a little bit of time. Might take a year or two even to adjust to this whole new video domain. And that's okay because, humans, we evolve very slowly, and there's no way that you can just put all this tremendous amount of pressure on somebody and expect them immediately to be okay with it. It's going to take something to ease into for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I saw the same thing. I think that a lot of the older generations were more playing catch up, to this new way of communicating with each other. But what's really been fascinating to me throughout the 7, 8 months that we've been into this is the accelerated adaptability across multiple generations and accepting this as the way that we communicate today. And I can relate that to my own family, in their early adoption and acceptance of using Zoom. They far better have a Zoom meeting, a Zoom happy hour, a Zoom birthday celebration where we can at least see each other, the entire family, even if we're in different remote locations, than not. Uh, it's almost like if we can't get together, at least we could see each other. And I think a lot of that will carry over even once we do get to a situation where we can get together physically. And which brings me to today's youth. Yes, I do have some concerns that there's a lack of socialization that's taking place in a physical setting. That our son isn't playing a team sport right now, but he will. So I think it's encouraging to see that there's professional sports that are still taking place. Gives me hope that we will return to that. But I'd like to think, and this is the optimist in me, is that once school gets started and in our community, they can go back to the classroom, or gatherings can take place, or we can get together to watch live music, or go to the movie theater, or have dinner, with a group of friends, that we are going to cherish it more than we did before. That we really are, this is the optimist in me, that we are really going to value that connection that we've been missing. And you're right, Angelica, it's been 7, 8 months. In the grand scheme of things in a lifetime, it's a blip, right? It's tough while we're living through it. It's always tough when you're living through it, but we will get through this. And so I'm so optimistic about the resiliency that we're developing across generations, and that our youth will remember this almost like we remember an earthquake or any sort of life-changing, event. What did we learn from it, and who are we as a result of it?
and always seeing that silver lining of how I'm always so fascinated by struggles, or crisis that happens globally, be it a recession or whatever, how society changes and learns from it. And I think that is something that we're looking at right now. And I could not be more excited for all of the transformation that's occurring because of this pandemic. I mean, it's sad to see, people getting sick, and obviously the loss of lives are terrible. But this is for so much innovation, and a lot of that's been there already. But how we bring it to market and the speed is just exciting. So much to look forward to.
This has been a great, great conversation. I wish we could continue, but then again, I don't think anybody would want to sit through a 3 or 4 hour podcast. But Angelica, it's so fascinating, everything you have to share, the Digital Pioneers Network, the Angelica Factor blog, and all the things that you write about. I'm sure people are going to be very interested in wanting to follow you and definitely hear more about what you have to say and track you. What would be the best way for them to get to know you a little bit better or to track your content?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, again, thank you so much for having me on the show today. The easiest way to reach out to me is, unlike other Gen Z, LinkedIn is my Facebook. So please do not hesitate. Type in Angelica Sirotin on LinkedIn, connect with me there. I am always open to helping any Gen Z or really any generations out who are interested in learning more about Generation Z and my services that I could provide. I also post regular content on Twitter, so you can follow me at Gen Z @Angelica. And good old email works as well. My first name dot last name @gmail.com. It is also provided on my LinkedIn page as well. So any information you can find there. And of course, my blog, theangelicafactor.com and digitalpioneersnetwork.org. So that's where you can find all the information.
So, what is your favorite media platform?
I love Twitter.
Okay.
Me too.
And I like Instagram, but Twitter mostly because I enjoy seeing content quickly and people tweet like wildfires. So it's very interesting. Great for attention spans too, because, Gen Z, we're like 10 seconds and then no interest.
I know. It's so true. Lately, that has been where I've spent most of my social media time as well.
Yeah. I like the immediacy of it, the community factor of it, just feeling that you're connected, especially around certain events. And I think it's the one that actually presents my most authentic self because I am completely, I don't filter. It's unfiltered. Thought maybe I should change it to Unfiltered Victor, on Twitter.
That's a really good tag. I like that one.
Well, Angelica, thank you so much for being part of the program. We look forward to obviously staying connected and following, the things that you're doing. We hope to have you on the show again sometime in the future.
Yes, thank you so much. This was a treat.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
All right.
You too.
Wow. So that was our conversation with Angelica. Seriously, I think steam's coming out of my head. So much that we discussed today. It was awesome. Awesome to have her on the program.
I've never felt older. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is the first time I felt like, wow, her brain is spinning.
Oh man. Did you want to send her in not even an application, but a job offer? It's like, come join us.
Right.
Oh man, talk about tech girl, talking about embracing not only new technology, but just thriving in being able to see. And I wasn't kidding. I would definitely be part of her group, when it comes to any sort of group project. You can just tell that she knows where this is headed. Mm-hmm. And so seriously, if Angelica was if it was Angelica 2020, I would vote for her today, twice on Sunday.
I think I would too. I'm all about that full transparency.
Awesome. So a lot to digest there. Obviously, the approaches that Gen Z has, not only in the workplace, but the acceleration of that growth. I think a lot of it, which has been driven by the pandemic. And I think it was an important point to make that a lot of this transformation was already taking place. It's just been, again, accelerated through these catalysts, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the fact that Gen Z as digital natives is really pushing the narrative, and how much organizations, and I think this is an important takeaway, is how many of these more traditional organizations, there's so much to learn from the next generation that they should be embracing these changes. So when she talked about, the entrepreneurial spirit and how organizations should embrace that entrepreneurial spirit, she's written a number of different blog posts, but really looking at, she had a prescription for how organizations should do this. And she talked about innovation competitions and hackathons, the value that Gen Z places on transparency, the fact that Gen Z is looking to have ownership. If an organization can embrace and give them ownership, give them control, give them an opportunity to be part of the process, they would definitely embrace it. And then the final part of this is investing in those tech resources that really create an opportunity to boost their efforts in the workplace.
That sums it all up.
That sums it up right there.
Right. I'm really excited to see, as she says, she's a pioneer, and we're all pioneers on this digital transformation road. And so there's things that we've done right, and there's things that haven't gone so right. And the next generation is going to improve on that. Absolutely. And the other thing, too, which gives me a lot of hope, in considering the fact that our own kids are Gen Z, and you look at someone who, like Angelica, that is kind of leading the charge, being that the tip of the arrow in making these changes. The fact that, they're not concerned about automation. They're not concerned about artificial intelligence. And if nothing else, they're embracing it because they know that it'll only enhance human capital, that if there's ways to make manual process automated, let's do it.
this will only provide an opportunity for me to better position myself in the labor market. I'll increase my skills and I'll be able to thrive. So, such an exciting guest. I hope this gave people, some optimism, some hope that we're moving in the right direction.
Yes, enjoy.
So once again, this is the Tech Girl Financial Podcast. Excited to be sharing lots of different guests and thoughts and insights from the world of technology, especially around the theme of innovation. We will continue doing that. We've got more exciting shows coming up over the course of the next couple of months, and we hope you'll join us.
Yes, and I just want to say, we are so proud to be supporting innovators and the tech industry and all that is going on out there. And so this is just another way of celebrating.
Absolutely. So we continue to encourage you to join us on our social networks, follow along, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram, and that you will come back to listen to the podcast once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Tech Girl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions.